Hi, Sally Ann here. When we decide we want to change our eating habits, where do we normally start? We focus on food and what we're eating. Perhaps you decide to eat less chocolate, stop snacking in the evenings, eat healthier lunches, stop picking at food while you're preparing dinner. But there's a question we often miss, and that is, why am I eating? Because if you don't know what's driving an eating habit, it can be very difficult to find the right way to change it. You may have experienced this yourself. You decided that you weren't going to eat chocolate in the evening, but the evening comes and you still want the chocolate. You decide to stop snacking in the afternoon, but at 3 o'clock, you find yourself looking for something to eat. You know what you want to change. You may even know what healthy eating looks like, but you don't necessarily understand why the eating is happening. One of the first steps I encourage women to experiment with is to pause before you eat and check in with, why am I eating right now? Today, I want to talk about why this simple practice is actually more difficult than it sounds. What some of the women that I've worked with have discovered when they have become curious about their eating, and why understanding the reason for eating is important, but it is just the first step towards changing a habit. Pausing before you eat, it sounds easy, doesn't it? But in reality, it can be surprisingly difficult. And that's because much of our eating happens automatically. We walk into the kitchen and we open the pantry. We make a cup of tea and reach for something to eat with it. We start preparing dinner and find ourselves picking at the food. We sit down at the television in the evening and start thinking about a snack. We see some food in the kitchen and take something as we walk past. There may be very little conscious thought between the trigger, seeing the food, and eating. And that's what habits are designed to do. Repeated behaviours become more automatic over time. They require less conscious thought. This is helpful in many areas of our life. Imagine having to think carefully about every single step involved in brushing your teeth or driving your car along a familiar route. But when it comes to an eating habit that you would like to change, that automatic response can make things difficult. Sometimes you won't remember to pause. You may remember halfway through eating. You might finish eating and then realize, I was going to check in with why I wanted that. That's okay. You've noticed. And noticing is part of becoming more aware of your eating. This isn't something else you need to get right. It's just something to become curious about. There is another reason why pausing can be difficult. Sometimes we're a little afraid of what we might discover. You might be worried that the reason you eat says something about who you are. Perhaps you're concerned you'll discover that you eat when you're stressed, lonely, overwhelmed, or upset. Or you may already have some idea of what drives your eating, but you don't know how to change it. And that can feel confronting. And this is why I encourage women to pause with an open mind. You don't need to force an answer. And you don't need to judge what you've noticed. If you discover that sometimes you eat when you're overwhelmed, then that's information about a pattern. It isn't a definition about who you are. There's a difference between saying, I'm an emotional eater, and noticing sometimes I use food when I'm overwhelmed. One can feel like an identity. The other gives you information about something that is happening in particular situations. What you discover when you pause is information about what may be driving a habit. It isn't a judgment about who you are, and you don't have to immediately know how to change it. One of the most important things that I've learned through working with women for the past 30 odd years is that the reason for eating is different for everyone. And this is why there isn't one strategy that will change everyone's eating habits. Some women that I've worked with have discovered that they're generally hungry because their meal timings aren't quite right for them. They may have thought they had a problem with afternoon snacking or cravings, but When they become more aware of their eating, they notice that they weren't eating earlier enough in the day or their meals weren't keeping them satisfied. Other women have discovered that food has become connected with taking a break. One client I recently spoke with described how food had become a reward, a distraction, and something that was just for her. Having 5 minutes alone had become connected with eating chocolate or opening up a bag of chips. For other women, tiredness and disrupted sleep have become important influences on their eating. I've worked with women doing shift work who have become curious about the connection between sleep, tiredness, hunger, and their eating patterns. And sometimes women discover that eating is simply connected with a well-established routine. The cup of tea comes with something sweet. Watching television means snacking. Preparing dinner means picking at food. The important point here is that the answer is different for everyone. Two women may want to stop eating chocolate in the evening, but the reason each woman is eating the chocolate may be completely different. And if the reason is different, then the way forward needs to be different too. And this is why I don't believe in giving women the same eating plan or the same set of rules. In fact, it's very rare that I give a woman an eating plan. I help her to design her own. We need to understand ourselves and what is driving our eating to set up a way of eating that truly nourishes us. I just want to pause here and share something that's really important. Becoming aware of why you're eating is not the same as knowing how to change the habit. You may already know that you eat when you're stressed. You may know that you reach for food when you're exhausted. You may know that chocolate has become a reward at the end of the day. This awareness is valuable, but it doesn't mean that you should automatically know what to do next. Eating habits can develop over many years, and there may be many different drivers involved. And sometimes the reason we think we're eating isn't the whole story. And this is where support can be beneficial. Having someone to help you explore the pattern with curiosity, understand what's driving it, and work out what changes are most likely to help you make the process much clearer. You don't have to solve your eating habit in a pause. The pause simply helps you to understand it. And when you understand what's really happening, you can begin to find the right solution and support for you. So this week, I'd like to invite you to try a simple experiment. Choose one eating moment that you're curious about. Perhaps it's your afternoon snack, eating while you prepare dinner, chocolate after dinner, something sweet with every cup of tea, evening snacking. But just choose one. When you remember, pause for a moment before you eat and ask, why am I eating right now? Then keep an open mind. You don't need to work through a long list of questions. You don't need to analyze yourself. You don't need to find the perfect answer, and you don't need to immediately change what you do next. Simply notice and observe. Perhaps an answer comes to you. Perhaps it doesn't. Perhaps you notice something after you've eaten. That's useful too. You're beginning to bring awareness to something that may have previously happened automatically. And that is one of the first steps towards changing an eating habit. When we want to change our eating habits, it's tempting to start with another rule. Stop eating this, eat less of that. Don't eat after a certain time. But before you try to control an eating habit, it can be helpful to understand it. Why is the eating happening? What's driving it? What might you actually need? You don't need to answer all of those questions today. You can begin with one pause and one question. Why am I eating right now? Keep an open mind about what you discover, because when we begin to understand the real reasons for eating, we have a much better chance of finding the right solution. And sometimes having the right support to understand those patterns and work out what to change can make all of the difference. In the next episode, I'm going to introduce you to Nasreen. Nasreen knew a lot about healthy eating, but knowing what to eat wasn't enough to change what was happening. She had been caught in cycles of losing and regaining weight, all or nothing thinking, and constantly planning when she would next eat chocolate. In our conversation, Nasreen shares what changed when she started to understand her eating, becoming more mindful and receiving personalized support to work out what would nourish her. Today, she describes a very different relationship with food. One of my favorite moments in our conversation is when she shares what happened to some of the chocolate she had hidden away in her drawer at work. I'll leave you to discover what happened when you listen to our conversation next episode. Until then, remember, pause is not there to stop you eating. It's there to help you to begin to understand your eating. If you started to notice a pattern in your eating, but you're not sure what's driving it, or you have some idea why you're eating, but you don't know how to change the habit, you don't have to work it out alone. In a free mindful eating strategy call, we'll talk about what's happening with your eating and explore a practical next step that is personalized to you. You'll find the link to book your free call in the show notes. I've also left a link to download my free emotional eating checklist. This is a resource that many of my clients start with. Thanks for listening today. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please let us know. Share the link on your social media pages and share it with a friend who may benefit. I look forward to sharing Nasreen's journey with food next week.